probably the most sought-after shipwreck in the Great Lakes. It's quite literally the holy grail, if you will, of shipwrecks.
This is a 50 feet dive.
That's a challenge.
Get to the bottom of this, see what it is.
Sometimes, you know, I wanted to be so much the Griffon that it's almost like you dream it so much that it is, like maybe it'll come true.
Welcome to Fairport, Michigan. I'm Ben Krumholz. For more than 300 years, a Lake Michigan mystery has remained unsolved. What happened to French explorer Robert LaSalle's Le Griffon? Perhaps no one has ever wanted to answer that question more than Steve Liebert.
I know the Great Lakes like the back of my hand.
Liebert has been making annual trips to Upper Michigan since 1981. Each time he brings a group of friends with him to search the bottom of Lake Michigan. The divers now go by the name the Great Lakes Exploration Group.
We just learned how to dive. We didn't know anything about boats. And certainly we didn't know anything about the weather patterns out here and how you can get yourself in trouble real fast with the storms that roll in and out of here.
The 59-year-old Liebert lives in Purcellville, Virginia. He retired from his intelligence analyst position with the U.S. Department of Defense to focus solely on finding the Griffon. Growing up near Dayton, Ohio, Liebert's interest in the vessel developed when he was 14 years old. His 8th grade history teacher told him about it.
He made it sound so interesting that I just couldn't fathom finding a ship like that. And then all of a sudden he puts his hand right on my left shoulder and says, and who knows, maybe someone in this room will find it one of these days.
Finding the Griffon has eluded maritime lovers for more than 3 centuries. It was the first European-owned vessel to sail the upper Great Lakes.
Lake Griffon is probably the most sought-after shipwreck in the Great Lakes. To Great Lakes ship exploration, it'd be like finding Noah's Ark.
The French ship was built near Niagara Falls. LaSalle constructed it to explore the Mississippi River for King Louis XIV of France.
And sails all the way across Lake Erie and up the Detroit-St. Clair River system and successfully across Lake Huron and makes it into Lake Michigan. And this is being done at a time when there were no charts, right? So these are some pretty accomplished sailors.
LaSalle never really got right down here to Green Bay proper, but he was in the Door County Peninsula. He did make his way down the lake shore.
Historians say LaSalle was in the area picking up fur pelts to finance his exploration.
There was such a demand for fur pelts in Europe and they had never seen the type of trading that was coming out of this area that was going to Montreal and then eventually ending up in Europe, a lot of it.
In September 1679, LaSalle sent 6 of his men in the Griffon with the fur to retrieve men and supplies to build a second vessel. However, the ship and its crew disappeared after leaving Washington Island, heading toward Michigan.
There's sort of 3 kind of basic theories. One, that it was ambushed by Native Americans and pillaged and sunk, or the crew itself got a little greedy with this wonderful load of furs and mutinied and took the furs and scuttled the vessel itself. And the one that's maybe the most credible is that it was lost in a storm.
Right. The lost in a storm theory is the one Liebert has long believed. He started gathering primary source documents after taking a trip to his wife Kathy's family cottage in Boulder Junction. At the time, she was his girlfriend, having met in high school.
We brought him up there one summer and he just saw the Great Lakes and fell in love with it.
And I started researching, and over the years I managed to discover that instead of being in Lake Huron like a lot of people thought, this is in northern Michigan.
In 2001, after 20 years of searching, Liebert finally found part of what he believed he was looking for.
Finally, on my 5th dive, and last dive, because we were just simply out of air, I bumped into something, knowing that I think the Griffon has to be in here, and I ran right into it.
What Liebert ran into was this piece of wood sticking 10 feet out of the lake bed.
The visibility was so bad I couldn't even read my gauges, but when I bumped into this thing, I knew it wasn't the anchor line. I was pretty excited.
After talking with museum curators and historians, Liebert's belief intensified that this piece of wood was once part of the Griffon.
I feel 99.9% sure that it is. And the reason why is because, the research that we've done.
12 years after Liebert's discovery, a team of scientists and divers finally gathered to try and identify that wooden beam as part of the Griffon. The holdup was in the courtroom.
Well, to identify it, you have to excavate it. And to excavate it in Michigan waters, you had to have a permit. To have a permit, you have to file it through the state of Michigan, and it was a big litigious battle between Michigan and our government, as well as Great Lakes Exploration. That took a long time.
Michigan State Representative Greg McMaster first met Liebert and the Great Lakes Exploration Group when he was a TV weatherman. He helped forecast what the weather might have been like when the Griffon disappeared in 1679. Through that work, McMaster learned about the permit struggles between the state of Michigan and the Exploration Group.
We had laws in Michigan, but they weren't being followed by our own government, and that led me to run for office.
You have to understand, we've been up and down in court 4 times at the federal level, lost all 4 times, and then end up in the appellate court 4 times, but won unanimously, okay? And then after all that was settled, then we had political struggles. I tell you what, it's been definitely trying times.
Any questions?
The situation wasn't just between Liebert's explorers and Michigan lawmakers. France had a stake in the issue as well.
It was a question of ownership. If you find a shipwreck, who is the owner of the shipwreck? Who is the owner of the ship?
By the way, if it is a Griffon, it doesn't belong to me, it doesn't belong to the state of Michigan, it belongs to France. That's their vessel.
While the ownership topic was settled, the French still needed to be convinced Liebert was more than just a treasure hunter.
At the beginning, there were some questions, because when you see people devoting so much work in a project for nothing, it raises questions.
In 2010, the 3 parties reached a cooperative agreement to protect the scientific and historical value of the possible shipwreck site.
We're over a decade into this project, but many times that is not unusual with a situation of an unidentified site and the various questions dealing with title, management authority, and the quality of research that needs to be devoted.
So now we have the go-ahead with this, not only state permits, but the federal permits from the Army Corps engineers, where we can at least do some test pits on this vessel to see if indeed it really is a Griffon.
A 7-day window opens to identify the Griffon as French archaeologists dive into Lake Michigan looking for artifacts.
Nobody knows. That's a challenge.
After about 10 years of legal and political battles, the Great Lakes Exploration Group was finally able to hit the water in hopes of identifying the Griffon.
It looks promising, it really does, so we'll see.
Optimism is high for Steve Liebert heading into his 7-day permit window for test excavation.
Are you ready, Professor Reed?
At his side, he has highly regarded underwater archaeologists and scientists from around the world.
We want to find some details of the architecture of the ship, but also some artifacts which can testify that this is a wreck and this wreck is a Griffon. It's why we are here.
Michel Lehour is the director of France's underwater archaeological program. Lehour and 2 other French archaeologists flew to the United States to find proof if Liebert did find the Griffon.
If we can find some artifacts which testify that that's a Griffon, that would be a very tremendous discovery.
This is a 50-feet dive.
Ken Verana is the project's manager. He has worked on nearly 200 possible shipwrecks, including the Titanic.
There's about 75% of your time that go into preparation, and then 25% of that time, or even less sometimes, in the actual field work.
The preparation for this project didn't provide as much help as planned. Imaging around the timber protruding 10 feet out of the bottom of the lake projected a hard surface about 2 to 4 feet below the lake bed. Scientists believed the surface was likely part of a ship. Instead, it turned out to be a thick layer of mussel shells.
You really don't know, even with very sophisticated remote sensing equipment, until you start ground truthing.
The surprise layer of shells kept commercial divers busy, dredging deeper into the lake bed than anticipated.
We're approximately 6 to 8 feet in a pit right now below where we're looking for the timber in question. The dive plan now, according to the archaeologist and the French team, is just get to the bottom of this, see what it is. Is it a mast? Is it a piece of timber? Is it something from a barn from around here? We don't know.
Archaeologists hope to find a clue sifting through dredge spoils on their boat surface.
What takes the time is, getting in there, looking at it, not ripping through it, so you can actually, know what's there, whether it's cultural, natural, a combination.
So far, we haven't encountered any artifacts or anything.
Until they do, it's up to the commercial divers to keep dredging.
And it steps back in.
It's their job to find something for the French archaeologists to look at to see if it's part of the Griffon.
Maybe in less than 10 minutes tomorrow we can find some artifacts which it's a proof. Or maybe we have to wait for 1 week. Nobody knows. That's a challenge.
Now, before our camera was allowed on the boat, we had to agree not to show any video that showed a relation between where the boat is and any sort of land. It's all in an effort to protect this site.
And I recognized it the other day. I recognized some of the airplanes. There are actually other commercial divers that have been trying to find this location.
The Department of Natural Resources and Delta County Sheriff's Department are monitoring this site. But without someone able to stand over it at all times, crews say there's always risk of unwanted visitors.
There's looters out there. There's people who know. We've had airplanes. We've had helicopters. We've had all kinds of boats alongside that know where we're at and where the site is.
The scientists think they know what the piece of timber is, but do they have the proof to link it to the Griffon?
It makes sense logically to this point. We'll find out as we go deeper.
Dredging at the possible site of the Griffon is taking longer than expected, without the results people have been hoping for. It has patience wearing thin, even for those used to waiting.
It's like I said, it's like Groundhog Day.
It's frustrating. I spent $80,000 on a survey, multiple surveys, received scientific data back, so we came out here with only the tools to go down 4 feet.
Steve Liebert says the cost of this week-long project is into 6 figures. Since first going out on Lake Michigan in 1981, Liebert estimates he has spent nearly $1 million trying to find the Griffon. And that doesn't count the money he spent during 10 years of court battles.
I'm anxious, but for the past 12 years, 13 years, my wife and I, every day, isn't or isn't it the Griffon? Now we know it's an old timber.
That news came after French archaeologists took their second look at the piece of timber Liebert found at the bottom of Lake Michigan back in 2001.
All the details could be interpreted as a part of the bowsprit, and there is no details which contradict this hypothesis.
The French archaeologists believe the possible bowsprit is centuries old based on erosion to it. That's important because historians believe the Griffon is the only possible centuries-old shipwreck in Lake Michigan.
There's no question in my mind, and I'm of course not a scientist, that is a piece of a ship. I mean, it's man-made.
While everyone involved believes it's likely a bowsprit of a ship, it can't be confirmed until commercial divers dredge deep enough to find out what it is connected to, if anything.
You see, it'll come down in the ship. It's going to be, at some point, fixed into the hull. It makes sense logically to this point. We'll find out as we go deeper.
I think that maybe Steve found the Griffon. I can't be sure. It's why I'm waiting.
What Lahore is waiting for is proof, either through what is at the other end of the possible bowsprit or some other artifact.
I can dream in my own life, but as archaeologist I have to prove.
Leave the surface.
Finding proof is easier said than done.
And, everyone's probably taking a shovel and to dig a ditch, and you get out of breath. Try that on the water. That's not an easy task.
Stir it up.
You can see the difficulty commercial divers are having with the hole they are dredging through this camera on their helmets.
Dropping down into our hole where we've been working. As I said, as you can see, I'm only a few feet in. And we're already down to black water.
While dredging continues at the bottom of Lake Michigan, back on shore, a special surprise awaits crew members.
These canoes are replicas of the same type of canoe that Salle used in 1679, through 1679 to 1682, here in Wisconsin and in Michigan.
This is somewhat of a reunion for these men. In 1976 and 77, many of them participated in an 8-month reenactment called LaSalle Expedition 2. The men traveled with canoes from Montreal, Canada to the Gulf of Mexico. They say it was during the coldest winter the Midwest has ever seen.
It creates a lot of nostalgia because we spent 8 months together. And being out there in the canoe was just like the good old times.
The gathering was a welcome sight amid the work to identify the Griffon, especially to the French archaeologists.
It's so funny and very emotional, in fact. I was thinking about LaSalle, what's a visionary.
And I wonder if LaSalle is up there somewhere, if he's not looking down and being very happy that we haven't forgotten him. And so now we want to be sure if we can find his ship and bring the whole thing full circle.
Crews reached the bottom of the possible bowsprit.
As a scientist, you're prepared for surprises like that.
Since starting their search in 1981, Steve Liebert and the members of the Great Lakes Exploration Group have made plenty of trips to Upper Michigan. They've also made plenty of friends along the way, some joining them in their effort to find the long-lost ship.
I was probably 9 or 10 years old when I first met Steve, and we were kids. We really didn't know what was going on. He would bring in his little dive boats, and he had scuba gear, and back then that was new to us, but we really never knew what he was doing all these years.
Liebert used to tell the locals he was searching for gold to keep people off his trail of finding the Griffon. Now some of them are providing their boats for his expeditions.
To watch these young guys grow up, and I used to help them get in boats. Now they're helping me get in boats, and it's just remarkable.
It's 31 years ago, and it's hard to believe it took this long to find it and to actually be a part of it now. From knowing when I was a little kid, now to be a part of this is a great thing.
So far, the primary mission of this expedition has been for crews to dredge around this piece of timber. The group hoped to confirm its belief of it being attached to a shipwreck, but that wasn't the case.
We realized that it was becoming more and more unstable, and then we were able to affirm that it was not connected directly with any subsurface feature or a shipwreck.
Crews came to that conclusion after 5 days of dredging. It required commercial divers rotating 45 feet dives from water surface to the lake bed. The piece of timber was stuck 9 feet into the lake bed while sticking 10 feet out of it. Crews dredged a hole 19 feet deep before reaching bedrock. The wooden beam was the only sign of a shipwreck.
The belief is I guess, more confident that this is indeed a bowsprit of an old vessel.
Even if it is a bowsprit, only the French archaeologists can confirm it came from the Griffon. With 2 days remaining on the excavation permits, the leader of the French group, Michel Lahour, had to fly back to France. His French colleagues remained.
We take many documentation on the piece of the wooden timber. We take measurement, we take observation, and we take a drawing of the timber.
With the possible bowsprit now lying at the bottom of Lake Michigan, the leader of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians visited the crew. He held a ceremony, hoping to bring good fortune.
And it was basically to give a blessing and thankfulness for our day, for Mother Earth, for the water, and especially for our tribal fishermen, and that we have a good day.
Aaron Payment says his ancestors were here back when the Griffon disappeared in 1679. He says Liebert looked over their traditions and accounts during his research.
It's my ancestors that actually helped to unlock the key to potentially where the Griffon is.
Time is now winding down to identify the Griffon, especially with bad weather on the horizon and the French archaeologists scheduled to fly home.
So far we have a component of a sailing vessel, and it appears to be very old. Our primary mission is to prove or disprove whether there is a site, a shipwreck site in this general location.
So we'll see what happens today and hopefully see if we're right.
There's some people have their hopes and dreams around this. It would be really cool to come through for them.
Midway through the project, new dredging equipment was brought in to pick up the pace.
And that means we can excavate more material, still in a systematic manner, but more quickly.
When we stepped up to a 4-inch airlift, we can move probably 6 times the material that the small water dredge can.
The new equipment didn't produce any new artifacts or leads, leaving the crew out of time to identify the Griffon during this expedition.
no one wants to quit.
Scientific research is not easy, and it's step by step. A week it's too short.
The search for Le Griffon will continue. We have protected and documented a important feature that was found at the site, the probable bowsprit.
Yeah, well, you know, I did hope this week would be it. Unfortunately, there were some problems with the science. Now we had to regroup and think, what else can we do?
The scientists, divers, and explorers still believe other parts of a ship are near the area where the possible bowsprit was recovered. Now it's just a matter of finding them, with enough proof to link them to the Griffon.
With my colleague of the French team, we hope that we can come back in Michigan to study the remains of a ship, perhaps the Griffon, perhaps another ship.
The real question we're looking at is, indeed, is this the site of Le Griffon? And I think we are getting closer.
The piece that we do know we have, there's no question in my mind that is extremely old. And if it is 300 years old, there's only one vessel that it can be, and that's Le Griffon.
Liebert has plans to move from Virginia to Michigan to live here year-round. He figures, why not? He's here all the time anyway, trying to find the elusive Griffon. In Fairport, Michigan, I'm Ben Krumpholz. Thanks for watching.